Yanks are coming, the Yanks are coming, the drums rum-tumming everywhere, so prepare.
Welcome back, my friends. This is the August show. I'd like to thank you for coming back. My name is Jim Kruses. I'm an Army veteran. I served from 1967 to 1970 during the Vietnam War, but deployed to Korea. This show is basically to inform people who have never had the honor of serving what the military life is like. Also, for the veterans who have served, to remember how much that you gave and how you should be honored to have served for this country. The Vietnam War ended over 50 years ago. It lasted from November 1st, 1955 to April 30th, 1975. Over 2.8 million servicemen and women served in Vietnam during that period. Over 10,000 of those were women, and more than 300,000 were wounded. 58,318 of our troops were killed and were memorialized on the Vietnam Memorial Wall in Washington, D.C. This wall is a place to have Americans remember and recognize the cost of war. It is also a place where comrades go to touch a name, or two, or three, and remember comrades who came home only in spirit. My guest today will speak of that service in that far-off land and what it was like. We veterans of that war, the ones with the Vietnam hats and shirts, are getting older, and their willingness to answer the country's call needs to be honored and respected. They have suffered through PTSD, Agent Orange, and the loss of comrades. When they came home, they were not respected and were shunned. But their country called them, and they were brave enough to answer that call. Remember this when you see them. They truly deserve your respect. Welcome back to you who never got it when you came home. My guest today is an Army combat veteran who served in Vietnam, Mr. Gary Lang, an Orland Park, Illinois resident, who has attended Moraine Valley Community College and is married and has a son and a daughter and 2 grandchildren. He entered the Army in 1970 and took his basic and advanced training at Fort Lewis, Washington. He deployed to Vietnam as a member of the 101st Airborne Division, as a member of the 3rd Battalion, 506th Infantry Regiment, and the 3rd Battalion, 187th Infantry Regiment. He was awarded the Combat Infantryman's Badge, the Bronze Star, and the Air Medal. He was honorably discharged from the 2nd Armored Division at Fort Hood in January 1971, and he is now president of Veterans Voices charity group. Welcome to the show, Gary.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks for the invitation.
What was the induction center like when you got your initial physical and were inducted?
The main thing I remember about that day was just standing in line a long time. You'd already taken your physical a couple of months before then, so it was the same facility where you took your physical. You had to get all your shots that day. I remember walking, it was like a gauntlet. You walked down and they had the air guns and they were hitting you from both sides, inspecting you, checking you out. You had to strip down and all this kind of thing. And it was your first experience in the military at that point. You know, it was what was to come. Yeah. And it was an all-day affair. I got there about 8 o'clock. I think it was on Van Buren downtown. And then we pulled out of there about 5 o'clock and headed for O'Hare Airport.
Oh, so that's what I was going to ask. You went to Fort Lewis from there, so you went by plane?
Went by plane. A lot of first. You know, I was 20 years old at the time. That was the first time I've ever flown. and it was on a 747. That was a new plane at the time. It was, I think we got there at about 10 o'clock their time, and we landed in Seattle, SeaTac Airport, Seattle, Tacoma, and by bus we went up to Fort Lewis, which is up around Puget Sound in Washington, and I think it was about midnight before we got there. We were like cattle being herded off the bus into the transit company barracks.
Right. What do you remember about your time in basic?
Basic training was very, it was the rudimentary elements of learning how to be a soldier. Everybody went through basic training, how to march, the disciplines, the basic first aid, basic weapons, physical conditioning was big. The standards then might not have been quite as high as they have right now. If you were a little overweight or whatever, they took you anyway, but they got you into shape. And some of the guys were a little, I don't want to say obese, but they really struggled the first few weeks with the physical training.
Larger than what was expected.
Yeah. And there was a big emphasis put on teamwork, your buddy, okay? The individuality stuff that was for civilians, you know. You're part of the team now.
Right.
Look out for each other, help each other. I know we had the inspections. We had a thing called Honor Platoon. If you won the Honor Platoon that week, it gave you little special privileges. Nothing really big, maybe first in the chow line, things like that. But you would, to help your buddies, to make sure your foot lockers were straightened away, double check each other. Everything was about the team.
Right. You know, talking about the chow line, what do you remember about standing in the line for chow line?
Well, standing in line, there was monkey bars out in front of the chow line, and you had to go down and back those monkey bars. And until you could do that, you know, you didn't get in the mess hall. Of course, early, there were some of the guys that couldn't do it. After about 5 or 6 attempts, the drill sergeant, once they get in there, you know, but you may have to come back out later and practice, okay? But inside the mess hall, there was a little harassment in there too in the beginning.
You remember your general orders?
No, I don't remember that, okay? You were expected to get in and get out of there in a certain period of time. And I remember you sat down to eat, and within 5 minutes, someone was in your ear shouting at you, you know, why are you still here, troop?
Yeah.
You better get out of here. So you'd woof it down and get out of the chow hall. When you pulled KP, there was a little harassment there too in the beginning. You know, there were various stations, servers, dining room orderly, washing dishes, pots and pans detail, okay? I remember the drill sergeants ate in their long little section at the end of the mess hall, and they loved to scream out, DRO, DRO. I mean, you had to hustle back there to see what they wanted. And it was usually for some little minor thing, like get me a cup of coffee and things like that. It was just to break you down.
Yep. What they did was teach you were in the Army.
Well, that's right. You know, disciplines were important.
You took your advanced individual training there. What was your MOS, your military occupation service, and what was it like?
Okay, at the end of basic training, you know, because that was a question everybody was wondering what's going to happen to me. At the end of basic training, we all were given our MOS, the military occupational specialty. Mine was 11 Bravo. They used the phonetic alphabet. You know, no one knew what anything was. And we asked the drill sergeant, what is 11 Bravo? And he said, well, that's light weapons infantry. Okay, well, I remember one guy asked, well, what does the B stand for? And he said, bullet stopper, which got his attention. So right after basic training, we didn't get a leave after basic. we marched right across the parade field into the AIT, Advanced Individual Training Barracks, and started our training there. The part of the fort we were in was an older part of the fort. We were in the old wooden barracks that they built for World War II. They reopened them probably for Korea and then Vietnam. Okay, so it was a no frills kind of atmosphere. AIT consisted of more intensified training and additional training, everything that had to do with being an infantryman. In basic training, you qualified with an M16. In AIT, we had to qualify with all the other weapons, 45, M60 machine gun, M79 grenade launcher, things like that. We had to fire a 50 caliber, which wasn't a weapon that we would use, but they wanted to make sure you knew how to use it. More intensified physical training, a lot of marching, a lot more marching. Them knowing that you were going to go into the infantry, they wanted to make sure you were in tip-top shape. Bivouacs, overnights, war games. They were Vietnam mock-ups of Vietnam villages, you know, that we were to take training in. One company would play the bad guys and we'd be the good guys, you know, things like that, you know. And we fired blanks with muzzle suppressors on them and things like that.
Now, I spent a little time at Fort Lewis. I was there for 4 weeks and I saw the mountain once. It rained that much. Did you see a lot of that?
Oh yeah, I could look right out in basic, you could look right out our window and see Mount Rainier, clear as a bell. Yeah. When I first got, I mean, I think the Washington gets a bad rap, I think, for weather. It was beautiful when I was out there. It did rain quite a bit, but it seemed to be on a timely basis. You knew when it was coming. But I figured, boy, if I got to be in the Army, this is the place to be. I mean, it was when we were marching up in the woods by Puget Sound, you know, the fresh air, the scenery was nice, you know.
Oh. Now, when you received your orders from to go to Vietnam, you had some special training, didn't you?
I didn't get any special training in the States. Once I got to Vietnam, there was you had to go through more tactical training before you got assigned to your unit. I went home on a leave. I was home for 18 days. I was engaged at the time. Went back to Fort Lewis to ship out. Went into another transit company. It was a very lonely time because one of the things about the Army was all you have are the guys, you know, your buddies. But you were just like, you were just wandering around for about 5 or 6 days. You belonged to nobody. You knew nobody. You were just waiting. We flew over from McChord Air Force Base. It took 3 legs. We flew to Alaska. They were all Air Force bases. From Anchorage, we went to, I think it was Yokota, Japan. And then we flew down to Vietnam. And we landed in Cam Ranh Bay. I think my DROS date was what was called date estimated return to service. The States was October 27th. And I remember when the doors opened and you got off that plane and that heat just hit you, okay? I think we landed there at night also. And there were the images that you saw originally were, you know, the war had been going on for about 5 years when I got there. So these images that you'd seen on TV all these years really hit home.
Yeah.
You know, the women carrying the water with the hats on, you know, when you're going on a convoy down the highway, the old-fashioned freight train, farmers with their water buffaloes in the field. They called them towns. They looked like they were in the dark ages, you know, if it wasn't the big cities like Saigon or Hanoi. But it was picturesque, but very backward.
Now, you were assigned to the 101st Airborne, but you were not airborne. Did they do that a lot?
Oh, yeah. It was a line company I was in. You didn't have to be a paratrooper to be in the 101st Airborne. You just need to have a heartbeat to get in there. And I first was assigned to the 3rd Battalion of the 506th, which was, indoctrination into the country. Then you went to another transit company. Then you got assigned to your permanent unit, 3rd Battalion, 506th Infantry, which was in Fubai. This was the 101st Airborne was in I Corps, which was up in the northern part of the country, up north of Da Nang. Once you got indoctrinated into the company, issued all your fatigues and things like that, and weapons, then you got shipped up to another base. It was called Camp Evans, a little bit farther north, where you went through in-country training. It was more in detail about tactics, what to look out for, and things like that. And you had to learn, I remember one of the things we had to learn how to do was rappel off of this tower, because we rode in a lot of helicopters. The thinking was that there may be times when they couldn't find a landing zone, so you'd have to rappel out of the helicopter.
That had to be interesting.
Yeah, it was about a 50-foot tower, you know. And the first time you're standing there with your back to it, and you got the rope, and you have to learn how to put it properly through the D-ring to let yourself down, and you just push off.
That had to be quite a feeling. All of a sudden you're out there.
Yeah, never had to use it, but we knew how to do it in case it came up.
Understood.
Then back to your company, and wouldn't wait to go to the field. And I remember when I went out to the field on Friday, November the 13th, it was a Friday, Friday the 13th, with about 4 or 5 other guys. And first time in a helicopter, and they didn't use the doors on the helicopter. They were too hard to get in and out of. Some of the doors were missing. Most of the time they were open. So when you lifted off, and as you got airborne, you could get about 6 guys in a Huey. 2 guys in the center and about 2 guys on each side, okay? And as you lifted off and you looked down, it was very picturesque, you know? And I remember I never felt in danger on the helicopter. Even though you were that high, you seemed like you were pretty safe. Some of these helicopter pilots were kind of cowboys, and I think to shake us up, when they would go into land, they would bank, and I think they would bank more than they would have to. And you'd start going over, and it's almost like you were looking straight down. And you had the door gunners on there too, and then he'd say, "Don't worry, the centrifugal force will keep you in." But on high, it was beautiful. You could see the mountains and the rice paddies and the other images I described. But as you started to descend, then you could start to see the bomb craters, trees blown apart. And then we could see the guys, the platoon we were going to get signed to, and we landed.
A wake-up call.
A wake-up call. And in the beginning, you were what they call the FNGs, you know, the FN new guys. You know, we were all replacements. It was just a complete turnover. So you had to prove yourself. They assigned you to a buddy, and he filled you in. If you had a good guy, you know, he showed you the ropes.
Now, I know you went out on patrols in the jungles. Can you describe what that was like?
Well, we worked there was a series of fire bases all over the country, okay, which was basically an artillery battery, some of them various sizes, on the top of a hill or mountain. The artillery was first. Below it was mortars, the mortar company, okay? Then below that were a series of bunkers. And farther out was the wire, okay, which was probably about triple deep. Then there was probably about 100 yards of nothing, completely cleared away, so you could see out. Beyond that, the foliage was defoliaged by the chemical, Agent Orange. It was everywhere. They sprayed it everywhere, you know, so you could see into the forest, okay? So we'd work we'd work the area. One platoon would be on the fire base manning the bunker for about a week, and the other 3 platoons would be in the field, riffing around the fire base. When I was there weren't any of these large search and destroy missions going on. The decision had already made to Vietnamize the war. Nixon was pulling out troops, and our job was to protect what we got here. It was going to be all turned over to the ARVNs, to the Army of the Republic of Vietnam when we left.
Right. What was it like being out in the jungle, though? I mean, you know, like your first time you walk out on patrol.
Well, you learn a lot about yourself. It was the monsoons when I got there, so you were pretty much wet all the time. There was wet weather gear, nobody used it. You had to carry about 50 or 60 pounds in your rucksack, water, equipment, food. It was all cans, sea rations, so it was heavy. I had to carry a radio quite a bit, which was another 25 pounds. So you may have 60 to 80 pounds on your back, okay? What was a day like out in the field? We start at the beginning. You'd get up about sunrise, complete noise and light discipline at night, okay, from about dusk to dawn. Get up, cook your food, you know, wash up a little bit, you know. I only shaved maybe once a week or so. It wasn't required. You didn't have your own clothes. You got resupplied every 3 days. And there was a big bag of clothes, and you'd rummage through it and find something that fit you, okay? Get ready for the day. The platoon leader, usually an officer, although we were always short of help over there. Sometimes our platoon leader was a sergeant first class, E7, okay? As I said, that was during the period when there was a drawdown, okay? We probably had about 20 to 25 guys in our platoon. That was understaffed also. But again, we were short of men. Probably enough for about 3 squads. You'd call in your position in the morning to the command post, the company commander, who would be traveling with a different platoon, and tell them your route for the day. Every time you stopped, call in your position, okay? Hacking your way through the jungle, if you were able to move about 1,000 meters, 1,000, 1,500 meters, that was quite a bit for a day. You got to remember, okay, we weren't following trails too much. That was frowned upon, okay? So you cut your way through. As I said, it was raining a lot of the time. It was hot, okay? As you moved, you'd move in the platoon size, but you'd stop, you'd drop your rucksacks, another platoon would go out of about 4 or 5 guys. The point man would have a machete, and he would cut a path through, okay? They might be gone for a half hour, okay? Then they'd come back, everybody got geared up again, and then you moved out again, okay? It was monotonous, it was tedious. After you moved, in the evening, you would try to find an area that was suitable to set up a night defensive position. Find a good place for your bedding. We didn't sleep in sleeping bags. We didn't have air mattresses. We had you had a poncho, which nobody used as a poncho. You tie the opening shut. That was your ground cover. You had a thin blanket called a poncho liner, okay? And you slept on the ground. If it rained, you would just try to throw half of that poncho over you. But you woke up wet a lot of times. But then you'd have to get up at least a couple times during the course of the night to pull guard duty.
Right.
Okay? So you didn't get a lot of rest either.
Well, when you were on guard duty out in the jungle, kind of explain what it was like being out there and knowing that...
Well, you'd set up, in your NDP, you try to identify the likely avenues of approach if you were going to get probed. By what we were dealing with, where I was regular Army, North Vietnamese Army, not the VC, which they were concentrated in the villages. we were out in the bush. There was only one village we ever went through when I was there. But so if you, let's say, that way, we figured we would get probed or attacked. You would set up claymore mines, which was an oblong object. It was concave. Inside it was plastic C4 explosives with small pellets in it. You'd set up your claymore out there, probably maybe 20, 30 yards from you. In front of the claymore, you'd put up a tripwire, a trip flare, a flare with a tripwire. And the guard stations were usually in those areas. You might have 3 or 4 of those claymores set out, okay? And it could be spooky because you're sitting there and you're staring out into it's pitch black, you can't see a thing. And then if it's raining on top of it, and you're sitting in the rain, and now you really can't hear anything, and you're just hoping that nothing happens. Some guys would be spooked and they'd blow the claymore. Okay, most of the time there was nothing there. Okay, but your guard duty might last 30 minutes to 45 minutes. Then you'd go back and try to get some sleep before your second one. It was kind of unnerving, but most of the time nothing would happen. But you had to guard against complacency because boredom would set in too.
Yeah.
Contact the enemy was infrequent. We could go weeks without engaging. Anytime we ran into them, they would pick the time and place of their choosing. As I said, when I was there, we were more or less in charge of making sure that the fire base was secured.
What's one of the main things you remember about your time over in Vietnam?
Well,
Something that comes out.
Oh, I know what I was. Can we go back to that
Sure.
question? Okay. When we did make contact, as I said, they would pick the time and the place. And usually you knew that if they chose to engage you then, it was usually because you were close to something that they didn't want you to find. There was a tremendous buildup of supplies during the time. It all came down through the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and there were other tributaries that went into Vietnam. It was a build-up for the offensive that they were going to plan once we left. They were fairly confident that they could have their way with the Arvin forces once we left. Yeah. So if you made contact, and usually we had a company commander with that was a little too gung-ho for a while. Our main purpose was to take care of each other and stay alive in the year that I was over there. If engaged, we certainly did our duty, okay? The company commander usually would tell us to increase the manpower in that area, and increase the patrols, see if we could find anything in there in the way of weapons caches or ammo and things like that. Mm-hmm. But you had to really guard against boredom because you could go weeks without contact.
I can understand that. Is there anything that really sticks in your mind about when you were over there, something that you think about that happened over there that you remember that really sticks in your mind?
Yeah, there was one particular contact. I don't want to get too gruesome about it. Well, we were on a trail. One of our platoons was ambushed the day before, and they lost 3 people. So the company commander decided that we would link up and work. We'd form a company-sized defensive position. And, we got picked up by the choppers in the morning, and we knew it was a hot area because once we took off, we looked out and we could see, we had escorts of Cobra gunships this time, I would say. So we knew that there could be something down there. And what they would prep the landing zones before you landed. I mean, they could just tear them up with their cannons and their miniguns, looking for if there was any unfriendlies down there, and maybe scare them off. Sometimes you get secondary explosions on the landing zones that the miniguns would trip, the booby traps. Got off, linked up, had lunch, and the company commander told us there was a valley he wanted us to go down to search for a bunker complex, which he thought was down there in the weapons cache. But he told us to get down there. He wanted us to follow a trail down there, okay, which was really a no-no. But you follow orders. We got down the side of the ravine, and at the base of the trail, you know, we got ambushed. 4 of our guys stepped on landmines. They were small, not powerful. They were just designed enough to, it took your leg off below your knee. 4 guys stepped on those. The first man was a platoon leader. I was carrying the radio. I froze, he went down. I didn't know what hit him. I thought he was shot, you know. And the medic was behind me. And I turned around and I says, Doc, I think the LT's hit. He ran around me, and about 10 feet in front of me stepped on one himself. At that point, you know, all hell breaks loose. It was a dogleg trail, and around the corner, there were what they call these trail watchers. They opened up fire. A firefight ensued. But you heard the term next man up. We had a buck sergeant, platoon sergeant, who had his act together and took over, organized things. One thing you gotta know is where you're at. So you gotta know how to read a map. And he was good. He was able to identify our position. We called in artillery. He would give me the grid coordinates. I'd relay the grid coordinates to the fire base, and then he walked it in real close to our location. And that scared him off. Okay, yeah. The whole thing lasted about 30 minutes. But then we had to get the wounded out of there. We had to find a way to we couldn't carry him back up the side of the hill. So we looked for an opening in the trees where a litter could be dropped down by a medevac, and cut out that area there and medevac the wounded out of there. And then riffed a little bit farther to see if we could find anything. We weren't too enthused about that, but then we went back up and gave the report to the CO. But that really probably should have never happened.
A lot of
so
that
I think about those.
Yeah.
But your question was, yeah, I think about those guys all the time. You know, that their life was changed for the rest of their life.
Yep. Now you talked about being lonely. What was it like, especially like at the holidays when you're over there?
Well, the only holiday we really observed was Thanksgiving and Christmas. I mean, things like 4th of July or Memorial, they came and went. You know, you didn't give that a second thought. We spent Christmas in the field. That incident I talked to happened about a week before Christmas. So we were still working that area at Christmas time. So I remember we got a hot meal on Christmas Day. They flew it out. The chaplain came out to talk to us, okay, to give us a sermon on Christmas morning. Other than that, we didn't think too much about it. You know, if you had to guard against getting too, making yourself too homesick. You know, you had to stay in the moment, okay?
Right.
We did go into the rear area, I remember, on Thanksgiving, the chop bed, and we had a typical Thanksgiving dinner in the mess hall on Thanksgiving. But you tried not to dwell on those things, because all you really had at that point was the people around you.
Right.
You know, you tried not to think. I talked about resupply. One of the things on the resupply was the mail bag. And I got a lot of mail. My fiance wrote me, when I was in the Army, she wrote me a letter every day. I got a lot of mail from my mother. Everybody didn't get a lot of mail.
Yeah, I know.
You know, my mother would send me care packages, the things that you do. I'd pick out the things I wanted, and you give the rest of it to your buddies.
Right. I understand, believe me. You were awarded the Combat Infantryman's Badge, a Bronze Star, and Air Medal. Can you tell us a little about what you did to achieve those? I mean,
well, the Combat Infantryman's Badge is for an infantryman who has been in combat or serves X amount of time in a combat zone. Okay, it's that rifle with the wreath around it. Okay, that's probably your prized possession.
Right.
The Bronze Star was, they actually had 2 Bronze Stars, but one was a unit citation that the 101st Airborne was given for their service over there. But then I got a second one that had to do with that incident I was just describing. You know, I had cleared out the brush to get the wounded out of there, and then cleared a trail so we could get off that main trail. It was booby trapped so we could get to a safer area. So the sergeant who took over actually got a Silver Star for that operation. The Air Medal is given out for so many what they call combat assaults, CAs they're calling them, every time you're inserted onto a landing zone, or it's for so much air time, so to speak. Every one of them, you're not going in under hostile fire under all of them, okay? But after so many, you're awarded the Air Medal. So I think it's for every 25 CAs, so I had 2 Air Medals.
Well, I understand. I mean, you earned them. You ended up at Fort Hood, assigned to the 2nd Armored Division, MIO unit. Mm-hmm. And how long were you there in Texas?
I was there a short period of time. I got there just before Thanksgiving. I got home from Vietnam at the end of October. 10 days after I got home, I got married. Then I went back, I got married, and then I went back to Fort Hood, Texas. I was assigned to the 2nd Armored. It was a mechanized infantry division unit there, company. And there wasn't much for us to do there. It was a lot of formations, you know, maintenance of the vehicles. We went on a couple of bivouacs, things like that. I was only there about 6 weeks. I spent one of the holidays there. I think it was Thanksgiving. I got to come home for Christmas. Then I went back to Fort Hood, and then about 2 weeks later, I was discharged. I got out 4 months early because with my MOS, there wasn't anything. They had no work for us. Right. So I got out early. That was in January 18th, 1972.
Great. And when you got out of the Army, what career did you decide to go into?
Well, I went back to the company I was working for. They held my job. It was the old Zara department stores. And I worked for them. I'd been working for them for about 5 or 6 years when I went in. So I went back to work for them and worked my way up. I worked for them for 20 years, and they went out of business in the mid-'80s, but I'd worked my way up to store manager when I finally left there.
Now, you're involved in an organization called Veterans Voices. This time you're president. Would you like to talk about what the group does and what you're trying to achieve with them?
Sure. We were formed about 10 years ago at Faith United Methodist Church in Orland Park. It started out as just sort of a bunch of veterans getting together for some camaraderie and fellowship. We met once a month. Our founder was a fellow named Darrell Wertheim. Darrell sadly passed away last July. But as time went on, we evolved and we started thinking of things we could do to help veterans. Okay? Initially, we volunteered our services to places like the Mantino Veterans Home. We evolved into a larger group. We became we're a 501c3 now. We work with it's an outreach program. We've located several other grassroots type veterans organizations, okay? We can work quickly to do things because we self-manage. You know, we don't have to go in through any red tape. If we get a request, we can act really quick on it. We work with individual veterans. We work with veterans organizations. We do a lot of volunteering. You'll see us. We use our services to provide color guards for various ceremonies. We're pretty visible. And we've done a lot of good in the area. we're a small group, you know, but we have a great bunch of guys.
Now, Gary's number and the website of Veterans Voices will be shown. If a person who's a veteran would like to be involved with Veterans Voices, get a hold of Gary. I'm a member myself. We're always looking for veterans that want to help other veterans, and it is a good organization. My final question is the one I ask all my vets and all my guests. How do you feel about being a vet?
Oh, good. You know, it was unsettling at the time. You have to understand, you know, when I went into the Army, it was a different time. When you know, there wasn't. I know when I came home, you know, I didn't experience any of the vitriol, you know, that some people did, you know. So, but what you did experience was indifference. You know, there wasn't a welcome home, thank you for your service, anything like that. It was just, oh, you're back, and you went back to work, you know, which was fine. You know, I didn't expect anything. Nobody thought they had done anything heroic, you know. No. When I was over there, we were pretty much just trying to take care of ourselves and get home. But so you never thought much about it at the time. But as you get older and you look back, you realize that you did do something special. You know, when your number came up, you went. You know, you went that way. You didn't go that way. And some people did go that way. You know, and so you're proud to say that when my number came up, I did my duty. We all did the best we could.
I appreciate that too. Now, I thank you for being on my show. I'd like you to have this medal and this pin.
Oh, thank you very much.
And welcome back.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Same to you.
Over the last 21 years, we've been sending care packages to our deployed troops. We've received many heartwarming letters from the troops we supported, and I like sharing them with you. And this one was from October 17th, 2017. Dear James, on behalf of the team, I'd like to thank you for the 2 boxes you sent this month. The team is very thankful for all that you do for our troops. I would like to also take the time to thank each and every person that contributed to filling the boxes and writing their notes of thanks. Kruses Krew is significantly programmed to all military and civilians that are deployed. I would like to also inform you that there's another team here taking over. They would like to sign up for the program. I pray that the Lord will bless everyone that has sacrificed time and money to support all of us here in Afghanistan. God bless you all. Very respectfully, Candace Marshall. Please remember, we have thousands of men and women deployed all over the world and on the seas. It only takes a little time and effort to remind them that the people of America still think about them and support them. One last item I'd like to remind everyone about is on August 26th in 2021, 13 troops were guarding a wall in Bagram Air Base. They were there for a crowd control, and as we were leaving Afghanistan, and many civilians were coming to try and leave the country, a terrorist joined the crowd and set off a bomb and killed 11 Marines, 1 Army soldier, and 1 sailor. Please, let's not forget them. Well, that's it for my show. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something about us vets. I look forward to seeing you in the next month on PHTV4. Signing off, honor and respect.